from the City of Presidents. It's the All About Quincy podcast. This is your host, John Melley. Join me as we explore the history, hidden gems, and highlight the businesses with great stories that all tell the tale why Quincy, Massachusetts is a great place to live. Hey there, it's John. How are you? I know you have a lot of things competing for your attention, so thanks for spending some time with me today. I really do appreciate it. Welcome to episode 2, where we have a very interesting guest, Tim Cahill, who is he's got an amazing resume, actually. He's currently the president of the Quincy Chamber of Commerce, and Tim has had an amazing career and a lifetime of public service. And one observation that I made, and unfortunately it was after we stopped recording, and I said to him, you're still campaigning. It's just that rather than you being the candidate, you've replaced yourself with the city of Quincy, and you're campaigning for the city of Quincy. And he liked that analogy. So let's just dive into my conversation with Tim, and I'll talk to you a little bit at the end. As I said at the top of the show, my guest today is Tim Cahill. Now, most of you folks listening to the program probably know who Tim is. But in case you don't, we're going to go through a little bit of a chronology before we have our conversation. So let's just start at the beginning. First, Tim was born.
You will lose them in the first minute if you go there, John.
Let's just start with his professional chronology here. He was the founder and owner of a place called Handshakes Cafe from 1982 to 94. He owned that for 12 years. And during that time, he also served as a counselor at large on the City of Quincy City Council. For 15 years, he also served as the Norfolk County Treasurer from January of 1997 to January of 2003. Then he became the Massachusetts State Treasurer. Tim served as the Treasurer and Receiver General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts from 2003 to 2011. In the middle of all that, he decided he was going to run for governor, which he did in 2009. He has also been a guest host of WBZ Radio's Nightside with Dan Ray. He now serves as the president of the Quincy Chamber of Commerce and the executive director of the Quincy Economic Development Corporation. So I think we can make a couple of assumptions.
Go ahead.
You probably know a couple of things about the city of Quincy.
I know you, yes.
Yes, and that's why we're excited to have you on as a guest of the All About Quincy podcast. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here, Tim.
John, you missed my first job, which I don't blame you because it wasn't listed, but my first job out of college was, very first job was in the Quincy Park Department.
Okay.
Working for our mayor's father, who ran the park department back then. I was underage, 14, but tall, so I made the cut. And my first real job out of college was as a tour director at the Adams National Historic Site. So
very cool.
Talk about history a little bit. That was the beginning of my historical education about Quincy. So I can go deep if you want, or we can stay on the surface. But that was my first and one of my favorite jobs of all time.
I can imagine it would be. My dad grew up in Milton, and so we would come and visit my grandparents, and we would come down the expressway, and I would see the signs for the Adams National Historic Site for years. And it wasn't until I married my wife and moved to Quincy and started to poke around the neighborhoods and all of that I was like, wait a minute. We have the writer of the Massachusetts State Constitution and a writer of the United States Constitution, presidents and first ladies right here in Quincy.
Of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, we could go on, and that would take up the whole show. And I'm happy to do it. But it's an amazing city. It's amazing modern city, but it's also an amazing historical city.
Yeah, it is. My first guest was Annie Dow, and she is a lifelong resident of Quincy. My wife is a fourth generation Quincy resident. And one of the things that I said to Annie was that one thing that I know about people who are from Quincy, they're passionate about the city of Quincy and very proud of being from Quincy. And we were talking about all the things that Quincy has, like with the new restaurants and the history and the different neighborhoods. I'll walk around with my dogs and I'll meet people and they'll say, oh yeah, my parents have lived here. My grandparents have lived here. They've been around 100 years, but then we have a large population of new folks to the city and a revitalization that's going on in the city. So there's a lot of stuff. We have an ocean on one side and the Blue Hills on the other side and quarries and a highway that runs through the middle of it.
It really has everything. And I was just selling our city to some folks who were looking to do some business in here. And the conversation was exactly what you just said. We got the water a mile from where I am in Quincy Center. We got the Blue Hills about a mile from where I am on the west side of Quincy Center. Beautiful historic district and a great sort of urban, but not too urban town feel. You know, I mean, you get city, but you still feel like you're in the suburbs. You got a patch of land. Most of us have driveways. They all work and stuff. So as opposed to Boston or Charlestown or something, I don't think there's a better place in the United States of America, and I don't think there's a better country than the United States. So, in my mind, that puts Quincy top of the list in the entire world.
Well, there you go. You're an advocate for the city. Aside from all the wonderful things that you just mentioned, what is it about Quincy that really, in your opinion, you have a lot more experience in the city than I do, but what do you think it is that drives that hometown pride spirit that people in Quincy have?
Geez, it's tough to put into a sentence because it's a feel and it's a hard one to articulate. But I think there's a sense of genuineness in Quincy that you don't find everywhere else, even for newcomers, for people who've been here forever. I mean, it does take some time. Like you said, a fourth generation Quincy resident is still a newcomer to some folks here. But at the same time, you know, we've got first generation immigrants, especially Asian, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And I feel honestly that they're as welcome and they feel as welcome to this community as my grandparents, Irish immigrants, and my wife's Italian immigrant grandparents felt, maybe even more so, because I think we're a little bit more, I personally believe we're more open to newcomers now than we even were back then. But they all settled here, and it might take a generation to become sort of part of Quincy. But I'll tell you, as someone who's seen tremendous highs and also some pretty deep lows in his life, people in Quincy will stick with you no matter what. They don't care about your pedigree. They don't care about your title. If you're a good person, they'll stand by you no matter what kind of issues you get into. And that's what makes it special. And it's different than some of the other communities on the South or North Shore and elsewhere. And again, it's hard to put in a sentence, but I think there's a genuineness here and a willingness to reach out that you don't just find everywhere, and especially in a city of 100,000 people. It's like a small town, you know, Mayberry, RFD kind of small town, but yet it's a city of over 100,000 people. And it's multi-generational, multi-ethnic, and yet people still want to come here, and once they come here, they want to stay.
Right. What do you think, and I know you have to be because of your position, but what are some of the favorite things that you like about Quincy, aside from what you just talked about? I mean, for example, Annie, our guest last time, she said she loved the Parks Department because of the summer camp program that they had when she was growing up. And so those are some of the things that she likes. What do you have as memories from your childhood that you remember about Quincy that made it special for you?
Well, I agree with Annie. I lived at Kincaid Park in Southwest Quincy growing up, playing whatever sport was in season. And we had a great youth program back then, played football for the Elks, Quincy Youth Football. And then interesting, when I had one of my statewide campaigns as an adult with 4 young daughters, we couldn't go on vacation one summer because I was too busy campaigning. So my wife, we stayed home, we stayed in the city, and they took advantage of the recreational opportunities. They learned to sail at Blacks Creek.
Oh, cool.
Played sports. And sailing is something that we never would have been exposed to. So there is so much to do. My favorite pastime in the city of Quincy, outside of coming to work and trying to help in ways that I can here at the chamber, is walking. My dad was a big walker. He was known as a walker. He would put in 10, 15 miles a day.
Wow.
I had a driver's license, always walked to work, and even when he retired, he just kept walking. So not to sound silly, but I'm following in his footsteps in some ways. Just sort of finding paths. And I think the pandemic really opened my eyes because there wasn't much to do. You couldn't go to the gym. Work was tough. Everything was closed. To me, it was a really interesting time to be able to enjoy the city without the traffic, without the congestion, without things that were bothering us prior. I mean, I'd be on my walks literally in the middle of the street. There was not a car coming in either direction for the whole walk. And finding some parks and some trails outside of the Blue Hills, just through the neighborhoods of Quincy, is my favorite pastime outside of spending time with my family or being at work. And it's interesting what you find walking and what you discover walking that you don't discover driving.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Little houses, little businesses, parks and then just open space. There's plenty of it in Quincy. I mean, tons of it. And the city's done a great job in this modern era of really maintaining those parks, adding to them, creating new parks and new walking paths and stuff. And we're working on a really exciting program with the city called the President's Trail, which comes from my interest in history, my interest in walking, and the fact that we've got all this history that's just sort of sitting here.
I know. Yeah.
The chamber and the city have gotten together and we're putting together what's called the President's Trail that will connect. It's a walking trail, an urban walking trail that will connect all of the significant historic sites in Quincy with really beautiful historic signage, a map, an app that you can follow along with, self-directed, self-guided. And you are literally walking in the footsteps of John Quincy Adams, Abigail, John Hancock, because all the signs will signify what was going on at this site at the time, usually and mostly in their words, in quotes that came from John Adams's diary or Abigail's diary. As you said at the outset, there is no other place in America that is the birthplace and the resting place of two presidents, right, and two signers of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's unique, and that history. And I think this is another thing that makes Quincy unique. The history is still important, but it doesn't overshadow the progress in the future. You know, we're kind of going in two different directions. And this President's Trail is a way to capture that history and allow people to walk through new Quincy while experiencing old Quincy. And we're really excited about it. Hopefully we'll be kicking it off sometime this summer.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I've often wondered, this may sound kind of geeky, but I'll say it anyway. I've often wondered if John Adams or John Quincy Adams and Abigail Adams, if they all came back now, what would they think?
You know, good question. In parts of it might be horrified because their farm is much smaller than it was when they left this earth. It's funny. It is geeky, but I can identify because I think about it a lot. You know, what would it be? What would it be like if you came back 200 years from now? What would you see? What would you recognize and what wouldn't you? Obviously, there's so much that's changed, but that church where they used to worship at is still there.
Yeah.
The graveyard where his father was buried and his ancestors are buried is still there.
Yeah. And the birthplaces.
Like,
wow, they kept it.
Yeah. And so I think he'd be honored because to know John Adams, know that he lived in a turbulent times. And when he died, I don't think he ever thought he would be remembered. Certainly not amongst the greats like Jefferson and Washington.
Right.
There was also a sore spot in his personality that he had been overlooked. And we have David McCulloch to thank mostly for that resurrection of John's reputation, because he did a marvelous job of uncovering and then promoting how important John Adams was and Abigail, both of them were to the founding of this country.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
That inspires me. And it's really brought I think it brings a lot of pride to those of us who live here to know that, again, we walk in their footsteps.
Yeah. What excites you the most about the future of Quincy? You have a kind of a bird's eye view of greater sense of the opportunities that are coming to Quincy, stuff that you can talk about. What excites you the most about the future of Quincy?
Well, I like the development that's taking place, and I know that isn't universally loved by everyone in Quincy because change is tough, but change is important in a city, in anything, in a person, in a city, in an entity, in a business. If you don't change, you die. If you don't keep growing, you shrink. And so I'm very excited with the way we've been able, and the city and the mayor has been able to incorporate the new with the old. And I like the fact that there is also open space being added, even though the buildings are getting bigger than they were in the past. There's always space around those buildings, so they don't feel quite as big. and it's not a concrete jungle. And as I look out the window of my office, it never will be. There's trees everywhere and green space. And I think that's why I think Quincy is poised to accelerate and grow even more so in the 21st century, because we're not stuck in the past. We honor our past, but we're not stuck in it. And I think that's I work in a beautiful Art Deco building that was built in 1929, Quincy's first skyscraper, the Granite Trust Building.
Yep.
And I can imagine back when the Theophilus King was building it, how on what used to be a church ground, how mortified people probably were that this huge building with an elevator was going in. And now it's a historic building.
Yeah.
And we're building other buildings, sometimes bigger. So, that's why Quincy is different, and why it's cool, and why I think it will always be a great place, because there's always a turnover in sort of the population. As I told you, as you know, the quarries and stonecutters brought the Irish, the Swedes, the Italians, all immigrants, all looking to make it in America. And then over the last 20 or 30 years, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Koreans have come, Indians from the continent have come.
Yep.
And they kind of invigorate. They are the new shopkeepers. They're the new restaurant owners. They're the new dry cleaners. They're the new sort of American dreamers. I think that really, that's the other thing about Quincy. It's an economic city, in addition to being a historic city. We're the birthplace of Dunkin' Donuts, the birthplace of Howard Johnson's, the birthplace of the Grossman companies, all businesses that were instrumental in the 20th century in taking this country to where it is today. And to me, that's exciting. I mean, we've got a company in Quincy, right down the street from me in Quincy Center, called IntelliCare. They're a health company that's created an app that allows nurses and people in healthcare to sort of create their own jobs and go where the jobs are. And they are now the fastest growing private company, one of the fastest growing private companies in the entire state, and one of the top fastest growing companies in the country. And again,
right here in Quincy.
Started here probably, in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's sort of a new, under the radar Quincy company that could become the next Uber. Because that's what they've created, an app-based technology that allows people who are qualified to be nurses pick the jobs that they want to pick, when they want to work and stuff. It really is, it's a great healthcare tool, but it's also a great freedom tool for people who have the skill set and want to, work nights, work weekends, work around their families and stuff. And that's just one. There's another company called Dive Technologies that is building the next generation of autonomous underwater vehicles, submarines.
Wow.
And they're building them on Willard Street using a 3D printer.
No kidding. That's fascinating.
It's and those are two companies we're associated with and I know of, and I guarantee there's a dozen or more that I don't even know yet. But they were born with a small group, a couple of guys, couple of friends who decided, hey, this is what we're going to do, and they've done it here in Quincy. So that's the thing that gives me a lot of hope going forward. As you said earlier, I was an entrepreneur at the beginning of my career, and I get to work with entrepreneurs now at the end of my career. So I'm blessed in that sense. And those are the people, again, they motivate me. They motivate me and they inspire me because they're doing what I did when I was in my 20s.
Right.
Hopefully doing it better and more successfully than I did. So it's a great place for people to either live, work, or play. And you can do it all here in Quincy. And we love the creators. And this is a great place to do that.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned Howard Johnson. I was just telling a friend of mine that my grandfather knew Howard Johnson. It's fun to hear all those names, and you don't realize that these are started local but became national chains. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts is all over the world, and they started in the Southern Artery, and that first store is still there, and out the donuts and pouring the coffee.
The funny story about that, real quick. Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day. The city holds it twice a year.
Yeah.
My wife and I pulled up and got in line with some paint or something like that. And we're sitting there, and it was the summer date. And we had the windows open, and we're parked in front across the street from the Dunkin' Donuts. And the Pan Mass Challenge was going by.
Huh.
And every other group of bicyclists are going, hey, that's the original Dunkin' Donuts. Hey, that's the original Dunkin' Donuts. We were there for 20 minutes and just basically heard everybody riding by going, hey, that's the original Dunkin' Donuts. I said, I should call up the sales rep at the radio station and say, I'm going to set up a camera on a tripod and just record this, and they can use it for a commercial.
Well, interesting fact is that we started a Hall of Fame, Business Hall of Fame, a couple of years ago here at the Chamber, right before the pandemic in 2019. And we inducted Dunkin' as the first member of that Hall of Fame.
Sure.
So we want to honor the businesses that have come before us and really stepped up. This year, we're going to be honoring a Quincy company called Granite City Electric.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Was started by an Italian immigrant in 1923, and they're one of the biggest electrical distributors in New England right now. So, like I said, we honor the founders and the people who got it started, and we're excited to follow and maybe create the next generation, or at least be part of the next generation. So somebody can drive down the street someday and say, that's where IntelliCare was started. That was the first one, or that was, the first something else. But, like I said, there are very few dull moments in Quincy, that's for sure, because you can always drive down some street and someone will point something out that you had no idea it was there. And when you think about it, you say, Jesus, it's a pretty special place.
Well, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show. Sure. And share your insights and your knowledge. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience before we sign off?
Well, I mean, as you know, as you said at the beginning, I'm the president of the Quincy Chamber of Commerce. And I think we play a valuable role in promoting Quincy. You can tell I'm a promoter, I guess, at heart. And it's easy to sell something when you really love it.
Sure.
And you feel strongly about it. So we just think that there is not a better place to do business. If you're lucky enough to find a place to live and raise your children, as my wife and I did here in Quincy, like I said, we feel blessed. We feel blessed to be here. And I think it was David McCulloch that might have said it, or someone else. I read it. You need to appreciate not just where you were born, but where you are in life and in the world and stuff. I mean, we could have been born in a third world country where we struggled, and we didn't have. We often shouldn't take for granted what we have.
Completely agree.
Being born in America, being born at this period of time, and we know there's a lot of challenges out there and struggles, but overall, there's no better place in the world, and no better time, I think, as much as I sometimes reminisce or romanticize about what it would be like growing up in the Revolutionary War period. I don't think I could have hacked it back then. A little tougher. When I read history, I say, geez, that's, I like having, cooking in an oven as opposed to an open flame, indoor plumbing and things that we take for granted that the rest of the world doesn't have.
Right.
And so, and I think we have a duty, I certainly feel that way, to make sure that you send that message out there, whether it was in politics, in business, or now in the chamber. I just want to, I'm not selling anything. I just want to really promote what the good things that take place in Quincy and in this world, because we should be appreciative more so than we are. It's the greatest country in the world. I felt that way for a long time. I still feel that way. And we just happen to be in the best city of the greatest country in the world. So we're doubly lucky. And I want to spread that message as much as you do.
Well, that's good. I completely agree with everything you just said. And I want to help you spread that message. So thank you for being here and sharing that with us and your insights, and for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you very much. And how do we catch this podcast? Do we subscribe to it? What's the best way to?
You can listen to it. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Amazon. It's on Stitcher. And if that doesn't work for you, you can go to allaboutquincypodcast.com and you can stream it there. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, John. Have a great show going forward, and I'll be back anytime you want.
Wasn't that a cool interview? I thought so, man. He's just got so much knowledge and passion for the city of Quincy, and it was great to have him on as a guest. I want to let you know that next week is Pollinator Week, and whether you know it or not, I have honeybee hives. So my guest for next week's episode is a beekeeper from the company that takes care of my hives. It's a fascinating interview, and I encourage you to listen to the next episode to coincide with the events of Pollinator Week. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I have a little bit of a rant to go on. As a dog owner, walking around, I know it's not the most pleasant task, but if your canine companion does caca, pick it up. I mean, plastic baggies, there are barrels in the parks. Toss it out. It's not healthy, and quite frankly, it's disgusting if you just leave your pooch's poop just laying in the park or on the sidewalk. I mean, if it's your dog, it's your responsibility to pick up after them. And most folks are great about it, but I walk around and I see enough of it to go, listen, we're all trying to live here together. Just pick it up and toss it in the barrel, please, for all of our sakes. Anyway, end of rant. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for my episode with the beekeepers for Pollinator Week and the All About Quincy podcast. If you know someone who would be a great guest for the All About Quincy podcast, we want to know about it. Business leaders, historians, unsung heroes, just go to the website at allaboutquincypodcast.com. Fill out the contact form, tell us who you think would be a great guest and why, and we will try to make that happen. So until next week, thanks for listening.